What's good, YouTube, and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be going over the 9 roles there are in Counter-Strike on T and CT side. On T side, these roles will consist of the IGL, the entry, the support, the AWPer, and the star rifling role. And on CT side, it will be the AWPer, the rotators, the big side anchor, and the small side anchor. So first things first, the IGL role on T side can be a number of its own positions. It could be a lurking role, it could be an entry role, it could be a star rifling role. There are IGLs that have done pretty much every which way of calling. I prefer to have it be the entry role, and the entry role is essentially a space creating role. It is not like the old metas in Counter-Strike where every single round you're running a strat and the entry is the entry every single round. Generally, the entry role will change from every round. Let's say you go onto a default and you go for a site split, or let's say your mid player, your entry, quote unquote, your space creator in mid, gets into connector and wants to lurk because he's in a good spot now and the rest of the team, it would make sense for them to go back A, and now he plays a lurking role. The entry role is really dependent on the round that you are playing. You don't need to be the entry every single round. So even though I explained it as the entry role, I want you guys to kind of visualize this role as the space creating role. This is what I played on pretty much all of my teams. This is what Kerrigan does. This is what Apex does. Pretty much what it is you are the person who's getting the most information, taking the most space, and then you are using that information to make a call. As an IGL, you want someone on your team to have all the information and then you have to get some digested form of it, or do you want to be the person with the information and then make the call based off of that? But basically the job of the IGL is to gather enough information within your default to get a read on what the CT side setup is and then call a high percentage round based off where the CTs are. What that would look like is, let's say you get all of mid control and you assume that there are 3 towards A. Let's say there's 1 in sight, there's 1 like jungle, and then an AWPer CT. This means that you will probably want to try and cat split, and you can smoke top con, you can smoke window, and you can just split up cat. You'll have, let's say, 3 players, 2 players going upper B, 2 or 3 players coming up cat, and now you're taking essentially a 5v2 on the B players. If you got this information off of a default, this is a high percentage late round call. You'll see this a lot in pro play. On other maps, the IGL role pretty much functions the same. You just gather a lot of information in your default, and you are the person with the final say on what your team is going to do in the round. You are the person who gets all the information from your team and says, we will do this. If your teammates offer suggestions and say, hey, I think we should do blah, 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 then you say yes or no. You need to be the person who has the final say to basically okay everything that your team does. Yes, your teammates can make round-winning calls and everything, but they need to be round-winning calls. You should be really the person with the final say. Now that I kind of knocked out the IGL and the entry role in a 2-for-1 deal, we can go ahead and get into the support role. So the support role on Mirage, at least, differs between supporting top mid and supporting towards B. So it's basically going to be like a top mid floater / underpass floater. So let's say you want to go slow mid and you want to go 2 out top mid at the same time as 2 players coming up underpass. That means that your support player will probably be going underpass, your entry will stay top mid, and your AWPer will stay top mid to try and help the entry get out at the same time as your underpass players coming up underpass. Now on other maps, this role will differ, but generally what it will play out as is wherever your team is most likely going to go, your support is going to go there as well and probably be supporting. Not anything too crazy for this role, but you're just going with the team. You're throwing proper nades for the team. You are supporting. Now, the lurk role is kind of an optional role. So it's not necessarily a star player role. It can be a star player role, but it's really contingent on how this lurker wants to play and what they're comfortable doing. Because you're going to be playing your T side as if your lurker is lurking, if the lurker doesn't want to lurk, he could come over and bolster mid. If you guys want to go mid, now instead of doing 2 underpass, 2 top mid, you guys could actually do 3 top mid, 2 underpass, and you have 5 people going mid. And this is based off of how the lurker wants to play. If the lurker wants to go A every round, he wants to lurk Palace every round, he wants to lurk Rafters every round, then he can do it if he wants to. If he also wants to hold A early or hold a push from here until you guys go mid, he can also do this. It's not necessarily percentage to always commit one player to one side of the map, because that means if CTs do some sort of re-aggression, then he's going to be taking a 2v1, and even though he's holding the angle, percentage-wise 2v1, do you really think it's worth it? And that's why you'll see a lot of teams kind of change who's lurking in their round. Sometimes the A player will be the lurker, sometimes the B player will be the lurker, and they'll switch which side of the map has a lurker to try and confuse the other team and keep their T side dynamic. Now for the star rifling role, it really depends who's going to be the star rifling role on your team. Sometimes it can be the entry towards mid, sometimes it could be the A lurker, sometimes it could be the support, because the support will generally be going towards the action, sometimes they'll be going underpass, sometimes they'll be going mid, and if they're going to be going out A, they're not going to be going first because it's the entry's job, so the support will actually turn into the star fragging role. So there's a few different ways that the star fragging role could play out, but it's really contingent on your team and how you run your default. Do you set up your entry a lot, or is he really self-sufficient? Do you set up your lurks a lot, or are they very self-sufficient? This really comes down to your actual players rather than there being a specific role for the star player. Generally, how it will work out is it's probably not going to be the entry unless you set him up a lot. It's going to be the person who's trading the entry or who will be towards the action, but not the first point of contact. But I just want to make this clear. There is no star rifle role. There are star spots on CT side, and there are good spots on T side. But if you set up your players correctly, really any spot could be a good spot. Next is the role you've all been waiting for, and it is the opper. So the opper functions within his own kind of set of rules. At least that's how I always ran it on my teams. And what this means is the opper can call his own picks. The opper can kind of override my call if he thinks he has a high % chance at getting an opening pick. So pretty much if I call, let's do a mid default and then do blah, 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 my opper can sit there and say, pause, can we actually just go for this? I think I can get a pick over here, and then I will build off of his call. I want my opper to have the highest amount of impact possible, and to be able to do that, I need to give him the ability to override my calls. As far as mid-round goes, the opper is generally going to be the type of player who's kind of just holding his teammates back. Let's say everyone gets out mid, he's just going to be sitting here like holding window. He could be walking up cat and potentially looking for a con pick. There's a lot of things the opper can do. You can play passive, you can play aggressive. The op is a one-shot gun, but it's also the most expensive gun. So some oppers will play extremely passive and some oppers will play extremely aggressive. It's really up to how you want to play. So here's an example of an opper looking for a pick in the middle of the round. Let's say you defaulted towards B and one of the B players used their smokes and the other B player still has his smoke. He's going to be looking for an opportunity to use his smoke. Either he's going to be sitting new box and trying to smoke the new box molly and have a sight hold, or he's going to be jiggling from CT. He could be spotting from coffin, doing this little like crack spot, or he could have a guy CT jiggling and he could be holding a smoke from first orange like this. But basically, someone needs to be spotting the entrance of banana so that you guys don't get all the way up before you get popped into sight and they could be blind when you're coming in. So they basically need a guy spotting. This is a perfect scenario to contact the op in. If the op scopes from deep and he walks in, he could look for this CT kill on the guy jiggling. He could come up further and look for this coffin pick. And then the further you work into sight with the op, the further the riflers walk in. And then basically what this means is by the time you get contact, you are basically on the site already. So there is no time for any rotates. And when the CTs have a smoke at banana, that is what they're going to try and do, is get information, smoke you off, and delay you for the rotates. So if you get this opening pick before they could even smoke you off, this is essentially a done deal. If you commit to the site, you should pretty much be winning that round 100% of the time. These are the kind of scenarios you want to be doing mid-round op contacts. It's basically the scenarios where you know that the CTs have to be jiggling for their information, and you think the opper could get an opening for you going into a site. Before we get into CT side, I just want to mention, guys, that I do offer coaching on my Medify. I'll link it down below. If you guys want to prove at the game quickly and get the secret sauce of what your game actually needs to get better, go ahead and check that link down below. The price of my sessions is generally pretty low compared to other CS creators in the space. And soon I'm going to start turning these coaching sessions into videos. But with that all being said, let's go ahead and get back into the video. So for CT side, we have the rotators, and the rotators on Mirage would be the con player and the cat player. And if you want to think of other rotators for other maps, the rotator's role basically consists of a player that doesn't need to be in a certain spot to win the round, and the positions that he will win a round off of will differ between round to round. So let's say my team wants to fight mid. I'm going to come up mid, I'm going to come up cat, and I'm going to help fight mid. Let's say my team doesn't want to fight mid. Maybe I'll double back towards B site, I'll go into ladder, I'll just chill around this area and not commit my life to mid. Now take a B anchor, for example. He can't afford to not play B unless it's a very specific round, because his job is B-apps. His job will always be B-apps. There's no thing that will really change where his job is not holding B-apps. There are very specific rounds where pro teams won't play a B-anchor, but for now, let's just follow this theory. What being a rotator means is you basically have a lot of freedom as to where you want to go on the map. You can play up cat this round. Let's say I am the cat player and I say, hey, I want to double window this round. After they smoke window, can you boost me into ladder? There's a lot of different ways you can play your spots. Whereas as an anchor, yes, there's a lot of different ways you can play your spots, but your job will pretty much stay the same every single round. Same thing goes for the con player. The con player's job is essentially to put some sort of pressure on mid every single round, whether through like a bottom con smoke or a boxes molly or a mid flash or a nade, some sort of pressure in mid. But he could also do that from window. He could also double up cat and come up here. Again, relatively same job every round, but the way that you do it can change and your job can technically change. Now, the next role to talk about is the big site anchor. Now, big site anchor, small site anchor is going to be new to a lot of you viewers, but basically what it means is the big site anchor is the anchor that is in charge of a lot of space. And generally what this player will be doing is playing retake, because to be able to hold this amount of space, you need a lot of players to be on site. So think of A on Ancient, for example. The A player rarely ever fights till he dies on A. He just plays retake, passes information to his team, so they rotate in time. Think of A site on Anubis. A site on Anubis actually functions very similar to A site on Mirage, because teams will push into A main and Palace for the same reason that teams will push into A main on Anubis. It's because you do it based off of the other team taking other space, and you think you could potentially isolate a lurker. You do these for the same reasons. These sites function very similarly, and yeah, this is what being a big site anchor is. And basically the job of the big site anchor is, again, to pass information, or if they execute, get two. Very rarely will you see pro players play under Palace when the rest of his team is fighting mid, because if he dies under Palace, then the T's will take enough space, take CT, and now it's extremely hard to retake because the rotates are so slow. Whereas if you were just jump spotting spawn, you see them come out, you can throw a smoke, you can flash for yourself, you can get out, you can molly default, and now you can run away. You have denied them the CT control. Assuming they don't take jungle, your retake is going to be a lot more straightforward now. The next role is the small site anchor, and the small site anchor will generally be playing on the site pretty much every single round. Let's compare this to be on Inferno or be on Anubis. The small site anchor's job is kind of to hold the site and get two, because it's not as much space you need to control as an A site Mirage or A site on Anubis. It's a lot easier to funnel the enemy team into areas where you want them to be. Let's say I'm jump spotting B and I see them starting to B pop. I can molly balcony, come around, and then hold the window. So I basically funnel them into the window, then I hold the window, and this is a good way of getting 2 kills on a B exec. There's a lot of different things that you can do to try and funnel the enemy team into your crosshair and double up, but basically the job of the small site anchor is to either delay for rotates or double up on the enemy team executing. And the important thing is you can do both, but you can't do neither. It's not good for you to play full retake on market, because look at what this retake looks like. If you don't have a player quick cat and you're playing retake on B like this, let's say they throw these smokes, you don't pretty much have any space to rotate at all. This looks like a done deal round. The T's have so much space, and yeah. So your job is essentially to get to or delay for rotates. You can do both, but you can't do neither. Now the next role on CT side is the Opper. And the Opper will have some sort of job on a default round, depending on how your team plays it. So how my team played pretty much every single game on CT side was I would be calling what space we are playing for. So let's say I want to play for A, I would call an A setup, or let's say we wanted to play for mid, we'd call a mid setup, and my Opper will work within that construct of the round that I called. So let's say we want to do a default. We start with one con, one towards A. I'm on cat, we have a B player, and my Opper is mid. His job is to somewhat help with mid. He doesn't always have to go mid on a round like this, but generally he should. He can go mid from connector, he can go mid from cat, he can jump ladder and go for a pick on Delpan like this. There's a lot of different ways that he can play around this, and it is his job to say exactly what he is doing every single round, because again, he has the most expensive gun. It is a one-shot gun. It is the easiest way to get a pick. We want to set him up. What this will look like is, let's say he says, I'm going to go con and go for a pick on top left mid. Round starts. My A player says, yep, I can flash over con when you want it. Just call it. This guy says, okay. He runs around, comes over here. Bottom con gets smoked. He calls for flash as he's jumping around this corner. Flash pops and boom. Free kill, he runs away, that's a pick, right? So my A player will help set him up. He can also call to set himself up. Pretty much everyone at the beginning of the round should be looking to set up the Opper to get into a good spot. That is why you'll see Oppers get boosted up or B, and they'll play a deeper angle like this. You'll see Oppers get set up, the anchor will molly close ramp, and the Opper will come up for a pick like this, or the Opper will come around con, and go for a pick like this. There's a lot of different ways the Opper can try and get an opening pick in the round, and it's up to everyone on the team to try and support him, and up to the Opper to ask for the support in the first place. If you follow this method of opping, it makes you very unpredictable in where you go, because if every round you're going for a pick, it's pretty hard to, you know, take some sort of space confidently on T side, as long as the picks that you're going for are consistent. You don't have to go for a pick every single round. Please don't feel like you have to go for a pick every single round. I've played with Oppers that feel like they need to do that. And even though you are unpredictable, it also adds some inconsistency to your CT side, because let's say you're having a bad game and your CT side is focused around you getting picks and having a good game. It's going to be a lot harder to play that game. This is why you'll see a lot of Oppers sometimes function as site anchors. So let's say they will, again, get boosted up or B and they'll lock down B. And now the B anchor will rotate around window or double up cat, and they play some sort of setup like this. When the Opper turns into the anchor, let's say at A, the Opper is opping ticket, and you have the A player doubled up in con, some sort of round like this. And the Opper can basically become a site anchor. This frees up your anchors to kind of move around and also adds another dynamic way of playing to your CT side, which again will be harder to predict. Let's say the op shoots at A and the other team thinks, oh, yep, they're on 3A setup, and then they try and go up cat, but there's 2 in connector, right? This is a great way of making your CT side extremely dynamic. And I think it goes without saying, but these roles will differ map to map. So take Ancient, for example. You have a cheetah player, you have a B anchor, you have a mid player, an A player, and an Opper. So the B anchor will be a small site anchor generally. The A player will be the big site anchor because the site is so huge. There's not a ton of places to hide necessarily, so you kind of should play retake a majority of the rounds. The mid player is kind of the rotator, but it really depends between the Opper and the mid player. Does the Opper want to pick up mid, or does the rotator want to pick up mid, or does the Opper want to float to B? But basically mid round, one of these players should really be floating towards B. The cheetah player kind of needs info on cheetah. He's not necessarily a rotator unless you consider him coming back into sight and reaggressing ramp or something like that, a rotator. There's some blurred lines on some maps is what I'm trying to say. And it's really up to you to kind of define what these rules mean between different maps. But now that you have the blueprint of how every role plays out and what their jobs are, you can kind of apply that to these roles that are wishy-washy and create your own playing style. If you want to play cheetah as more of an anchor and try and get cheetah every single round and smoke this off and stay as long as your teammates are in mid, which is kind of generally what you should do. Or do you want to play it more as a rotator? You kind of give cheetah even though you throw the util, and you come back around site and you reaggress ramp when the T's are taking cheetah. These are both very valid ways of playing cheetah, but it really depends on how you want to actually play this. Also, think of the way that Ancient functions. You have a big site anchor that plays retake. You have 2 people who play the same site who kind of have their own job because there's 2 site entrances, and then you start generally at least 2 towards mid. What does this sound like? You're right. Sounds like Anubis. You have 2 players that generally start towards mid. One of the mid players rotate off towards B so they can kind of triple B. One of the B players deals with E box. One of the other B players deals with B main. And the A player plays retake on A because he has a big site anchor. Now you can kind of see how even though these maps function very differently and how they play out in the little micro things, the actual big picture macro concepts can apply to pretty much every map. Even though they have to be tweaked a little bit, it's still important to understand how these rules tie into every game and how you can apply them to new maps, different maps, and play every map to the highest percentage. At the end of the day, pro Counter-Strike is playing it to its highest percentage. So as long as you know these concepts and you can build on these, you'll eventually become a very strong player and have very high awareness for how this game actually plays out at a high level. But with that all being said, that's going to be it for today's video. Thank you guys for watching. And again, like I mentioned earlier, I offer coaching on my Medify. If you guys want to go ahead and check that out, it would be much appreciated, and I will start doing a coaching series soon. I'll try and do 1 or 2 coaching sessions a week because I do stream them over on my Twitch. It's very fun for me to do and very good for you guys to learn. And if you guys have any ideas for what videos I should make next, go ahead and leave them down in the comments, and don't forget to leave a like as it does help a lot. But thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.